Hello, I'm Sydney Mungeon, and I am a part of the White Paper Symposium for the Nevada Law Journal at Boyd School of Law. And today I'm interviewing the authors of the white paper. So if we could just start off, if you'll just introduce yourselves and share your role on the Nevada Law Journal.
Hi, Sydney. I'm RJ Lemus. I am a co-author of the white paper this year that is ready to do the difficult work ahead, the legal legacy of Senator Harry Reid. I was the Nevada law editor on volume 23 of the Nevada Law Journal. And part of what we do is write an annual white paper on some topic of law that's important in Nevada. My co-writer Sarah and I chose to write this paper on Harry Reid's legacy.
Yeah, and my name's Sarah Vale. I got to be RJ's co-author and work on this great paper, and we're excited to talk about it today.
Awesome. So as you mentioned, your topic is about Harry Reid. Will you just describe how you chose this topic and what it means to you?
Sure. So we had actually a hard time choosing a topic because there were so many options. Our boundaries were really just that it had to be a Nevada topic. I think we ended up choosing Harry Reid as our focus because he had recently passed away and because he's so important to the Nevada community and he's important to the law school as well. He's he was a big supporter of the law school. He also, I believe, was a distinguished fellow at the law school. So by choosing to focus on his legal legacy, it allowed us to cover a big span of topics important to Nevadans.
As Sarah said, it was in the wake of Senator Reid's passing, it really felt as though it was a paper that needed to be written, both for the historic record and as part of UNLV's place in Harry Reid's legacy. And we just felt like we were lucky to be the people in the right place at the right time to be able to write about Senator Reid.
Did you connect personally to the topic at all?
For me, I was born and raised here in Nevada. Harry Reid was always just such a fixture of my life growing up here. So it really was something that, for me as a Nevadan, I felt like a real point of pride to be able to get into his legacy and put my name in small print on the same page as somebody like Senator Reid.
I also connected personally to the topic, but in the opposite way, because I'm not from Nevada. I moved here for law school and am intending to stay here a while. So I was really excited to have this topic be a way that I could learn more about my new home state and learn more about Nevada's most famous politician and a very influential figure.
That's great. How did you determine what aspects of Senator Reid's legacy to focus on? I know the paper spans a wide array of topics, and I'm sure that was difficult, but what was your guys' process through that?
Yeah, it was a bit difficult because he obviously played a huge role in so many different areas of Nevada law. For me personally, I was excited to focus on his environmental legacy for two main reasons, I guess. First, because just one of my favorite things about Nevada is the access to public lands, hiking, camping, and I like to spend a lot of time outdoors. And I was excited to learn how Nevada came to be 85% public land, which is, one of the biggest percentages of any state. And then I'm also married to an environmentalist. So of course we have a lot of dinner table conversations about conservation and public lands. So I was really excited to kind of focus on that specific area of his work.
Thank you. Your paper also highlights a lot of interviews that you conducted with either people that worked really closely with Senator Reid or who have worked so far since with his legacy. How did you decide on who to interview? I'm sure there was also a vast array of people that you could have chosen. And what did those interviews bring to the depth of the paper?
Well, for me, the interviews really are the paper. The value of this paper and kind of the academic record is bringing these interviews out. Within the year of his passing, it was for some topics just really obvious who we would interview, like Kai Anderson, John Ralston, former Congresswoman Shelley Berkeley. These people were right at the top of our list from day one. Some other the interviewees we had to think about and kind of bring up people like Megan Jones, who a little bit below the spotlight. If you're really, really into Nevada politics, you know who she is. But it turns out she's crucial to Senator Reid's legacy and a lot of his policy positions and his political positions as well. And we were really lucky to get people like Megan Jones involved as well. You asked about how we chose the people that we chose. There were definitely some people that we wish we could have gotten that the schedules just didn't work out. But ultimately, I think the pantheon of Harry Reid's people that he's touched, people that he knew, people that were so happy to get in touch with us and be called by us and be able to be a part of this. I mean, they don't know who R.J. Lemus is, but when I said the name Senator Harry Reid and Boyd School of Law, everybody took my call and everybody said, yeah, let's be a part of this.
And the other group of people we wanted to focus on for the interviews were not just people who knew Harry Reid and who had worked with him, like the people RJ mentioned, but we were also interested in finding a group of people who maybe knew him personally, maybe had met, or maybe didn't, but they are the people who are kind of taking the legacy and the work that Harry Reid started and are continuing that work in Nevada today and sort of building on that legacy. So I think we tried to get both perspectives in our paper, and those interviews, I think, really bring the paper to life.
I agree. It was very interesting, all of the interviews that you guys conducted. All right, so Senator Reid's passion for conservation, land use, and environmental policy was sparked at a young age when he used to visit the springs to escape the hot Nevada summers. And the paper discusses how what began as just a childhood memory or a childhood activity blossomed into what became a substantial portion of his legislative work. Can you, Sarah, I know you focused mostly on that portion of the paper. Can you share a few of Senator Reid's most notable accomplishments in these areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting, congressional archivists, when they were cleaning out Harry Reid's office, I think after he retired, they found that over half of his notes and papers related to his environmental work. So it felt appropriate to use about half of our paper to focus on that as well. And I sort of put his work into a couple different buckets, the first one being his conservation work. So I think one of the most shocking figures is the amount of wilderness that Harry Reid was influential in designating. Before his time in office, Nevada had about 67,000 acres of wilderness, and by the time he left, that figure was around 3.4 million. So he was really influential in designating that land. We talked to Kai Anderson, who worked with Harry Reid for about probably 6 years while Harry Reid was in the Senate. And Kai Anderson really explained how he was able to get that much wilderness designated was because of his willingness to work with the other senators in Nevada, like Senator Ensign, and to really be able to reach across the aisle and work with Republicans as well to make sure that we had land that was designated for wilderness, but also that where we needed to have some cutouts for developments or something like that, that those bills would accommodate for that as well. We also have our only national park in Nevada, Great Basin National Park, is really thanks to Harry Reid's work, as well as 2 new national monuments, Gold Butte and Basin and Range. Also, the fact that we don't have a nuclear repository of waste in Yucca Mountain, I think is thanks to Senator Harry Reid, and he was really the champion to make sure that Nevada didn't sort of get the short end of the stick on where nuclear waste would be stored, even though he was a freshman in Congress at the time and he was up against much more senior politicians. He was really, that was very important to him. He thought there would be a lot of negative effects. But one other area I want to highlight was, I think, his water policy. The paper, talks a lot about the work that he did to save Pyramid Lake and Walker Lake, and he really helped to negotiate what was called the Truckee River Operating Agreement. There was decades of litigation around this water and around the lakes between tribes and agriculture and developers and environmentalists, and he really helped to broker a deal to make sure that not only those endangered lakes would be protected and rehabilitated, but to make sure that most of that water stayed in Nevada as well.
Building on Senator Reid's legacy in environmental policy, public lands, and conservation, what challenges and or opportunities do you foresee in these areas in the future?
So I think starting, where I just left off with water policy, Senator Harry Reid's, I think, blueprint of negotiating these really complicated water fights, I guess you could call it, I think could be used as an opportunity for figuring out how we want to allocate water from the Colorado River. We wake up almost every day to news about how Lake Mead is lower and lower and lower. And there are many different states in the southwest and west that are depending on the Colorado River. And there are currently, the Colorado River is currently over allocated, meaning the amount of water that each state is allocated to get, there's actually not that much water currently existing in the river. So there are going to be a lot of fights, and currently are fights, over how that water should better be allocated. And I think having a figure like Senator Harry Reid, or someone who can come in and step in and help to broker a deal that more or less tries to work with everybody and get the best solution, is really important. Another big opportunity I see is around, I think, obviously renewable energy. The paper talks a lot about how Senator Harry Reid was really sort of a bulwark against coal. So I think it was John Ralston who said that he crushed Nevada or NV Energy's dependence on coal, and it was really important to him to get more renewable energy in Nevada. And at the same time, I think that presents a challenge because we currently have fights going on around lithium mining and the placement of these solar farms, because we have to be really strategic in where we are allowing these solar farms and wind farms and lithium mines to be placed, to make sure that they're not disrupting really delicate habitat or putting endangered species even more at risk. So I think using something like California currently has I always get the name wrong, but it's essentially, I think it's called the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, NRECDC. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, but California's strategy for adopting that plan was to bring in all these different stakeholders, your environmentalists and the developers and your renewable energy advocates, and to have everybody come in and say, well, this area of the desert should be zoned for this, and this area should be zoned for development, and this should be zoned as protected and wilderness. And I think using something like that could be a big opportunity that Nevada might have as well.
Great, thank you. RJ, your portion of the paper highlighted Senator Reid's legacy in a wide variety of areas, including gaming, healthcare, and immigration. Could you briefly touch on his influence in a few of these areas and on maybe what you believe are his greatest achievements?
I'd be happy to, thank you. I'm going to answer your second question first. And I really think 100 years from now, when historians are still writing about Senator Reid, they're going to be writing about the Affordable Care Act and how it really was, and it's easy to take it for granted now, over a decade later, but it really was a giant leap forward for health coverage in America. It led to a bitter political fight. Not only was passing the Affordable Care Act a monumental legislative achievement, but keeping the Affordable Care Act in place, keeping all these people who have never had health coverage before, keeping their health coverage was a great achievement for Senator Reid and for all the people that managed to get it done. So bottom line up front, I think, of course, I guess President Obama had something to do with the Affordable Care Act as well, but the legacy of Senator Reid, of Leader Reid, is going to be the Affordable Care Act as well. I also really want to, Sarah mentioned Yucca Mountain, and I'm sure there are a lot of Nevadans today, maybe new Nevadans, who don't even know what Yucca Mountain is, why it's even something that would cross our lips. Get on Wikipedia, what's Yucca Mountain about? Mm-hmm. And to think that is the case is amazing for somebody who grew up here, who learned about Yucca Mountain in the 4th grade as a place where they were going to put nuclear waste. And Harry Reid, for all of his career, time and time again, it's something he just did not budge on. And I think it really goes to show that when you're right and when you are backing the best interests of your state and your state believes in you, a good legislator, a good politician, and Harry Reid can get something pretty amazing done. And finally, you mentioned labor. I can't go without saying how important Harry Reid was to the labor movement. It was a movement that was, in many ways, on its way out in Nevada. In America, some might say it still is. But he was the best friend to labor. He really made his fellow politicians talk about labor in a way that I think a lot of them might have forgotten how important union employees are to America and to the political careers of many.
Thank you. Speaking of labor unions, as you just said, your portion of the paper also focuses on the labor unions and how they played a crucial role in Senator Reid's political alliance. Looking ahead, how might the relationship between political leaders and labor unions continue to shape Nevada's political landscape? And are there any emerging issues that could arise or influence this dynamic?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to get ahead of your question there. I didn't mean to get in front of the question, but yeah, labor's a big deal in Nevada. In our paper, one of our really good interview was with John Ralston, who's currently writing the definitive biography on him. So he's going to go into all the detail and everything. I can't wait to read it myself, but that's not what we're here to pitch. And I talked to him, and I asked him about Nevada becoming the fourth state in the presidential selection process, the nominee selection process. And for years and years and years, Nevada was a later state. Nevada was not a place that national politicians would come for the purpose of running for president anyway. And Senator Reid, possibly single-handedly, got Nevada moved up to the fourth state. And with that came a lot more political interest and will in Nevada issues, that big issue being labor. And another early state, Iowa, there's this ethanol pledge that they can. If you're not familiar, ethanol goes in our gas, it's made of corn, and every politician needs to pledge to keep ethanol in gas for the sake of their political career if they want to be president, for better or worse. And I asked Ralston, what is that ethanol issue here in Nevada? What is the thing that politicians come to Nevada and have to talk about, even if they didn't want to? And I'll say this, he said it was Yucca Mountain, for the record. But I asked him, well, why isn't it labor? And we had a really good conversation, much of it's in the paper. And he admitted that, yeah, it was Harry Reid bringing these politicians to this big, working class, union-backed state like Nevada, getting them in front of culinary union, really making it a required stop to speak to union leaders as part of an early presidential state that really reinserted the importance of labor into the presidential race.
Great, thank you. The paper illustrates Senator Reid's evolving positions on various issues such as marijuana use and LGBTQ plus equality. It was interesting to read about how in the beginning of his career, early 2000s, he was against marijuana use, dead stop 100%. And then he, over the years, became aware of the clear importance of its medical benefits. And the paper really illustrates how he was open to learning and open to evolving his positions, and he could acknowledge that his positions had changed, which I think maybe a lot of political leaders have a hard time doing, acknowledging that, things change. As political opinions shift and new information emerges, what role do you see for future leaders in adapting their positions and policies to align with changing perspectives?
So I think, just by the title of our paper, the big thesis is the Senator Reid's legal legacy in Nevada. There's no question about that. But I think your question really touches on this almost sub-thesis of the paper, this underlying theme of Senator Reid's intellectual honesty, that he was always driven by his values and driven by the information at hand. And you mentioned marijuana and LGBT plus equality, gun control, other issues too, that he really felt like this is the right thing. But as he gained new information, and especially as he talked to people who were important to him, as he was in the room with people who he trusted, who told him, you're wrong about this, he had and I brought this up with current Nevada Treasurer Zach Conine in an interview, and he called it the intellectual honesty, to say, when I get this new information, I can either ignore it, pretend it's not true, and keep with the political allies or the positions that I have in the past, or I can take this new information and say, actually, you know what, I was wrong. I got to come out on the other way. And I think moving forward, moving to the future, what your actual question was, that's something that I hope is really the mantle of Senator Reid, is to not cling to, especially as public leaders, as policymakers, legislators, anybody who might read it, to always have an open mind of, if I'm wrong, and if this new information, going by the lodestone of my own values, tells me I have to come out on the other way, well, then I have to come out on the other way.
Incredible. Thank you. All right, so as you researched Senator Reid's legacy, were there any specific aspects that you wished that you had more time to explore or had more room in your paper to dive into?
I'll go first. So I think there are two main areas. I touched a little bit on the Colorado River and the current debate around that right now. I think I wish I had had a little bit more time to dive into that discussion and what the different ramifications are, as well as other current sort of state and federal legislation that is up for debate right now, or might be a bill that's been presented. Like one example we have right now, a bill that was just presented to expand the Sloan Canyon Conservation Area. And as part of expanding the conservation area, they would allow the Southern Nevada Water Authority to drill in the conservation area to bring more water to certain parts of Las Vegas. So I think it would have been really interesting to dive into some of the nuances of the give and take and the balance of the desire to protect the land, but also to, assist with Southern Nevada's growing population, and what does that look like? I think if I had a little more time, I would have dove into those topics more.
Interesting. RJ?
Well, I alluded to just a moment ago talking about labor, and I really think maybe the next step, maybe the next full paper that can analyze the effects of Senator Reid, maybe not looking back, but really looking forward, is what are the outcomes based off of a renewed political national interest in labor unions, or at least making people address and talk to and make labor unions a part of their platform. I think there's some interesting scholarship that could be done on that. Maybe not by me, but by somebody else with a great idea. I think it would be really interesting. And really, and I think Sarah almost said the same thing, almost every part of our paper, each topic is really just kind of like a bite from a buffet of a much deeper topic. Whole books could be written on the Affordable Care Act, or on labor unions in Nevada and labor unions nationwide, or on marijuana rights, LGBT rights, things like that. And at some point, I just had to decide we've covered enough of this topic. It's time to move on.
Mm-hmm. And I think readers will be surprised that was an issue. When reading it, it just, it does go in to such interesting depth, and you guys did a brilliant job with it, with the amount of room that you had.
Thanks so much.
All right. So as you were researching, was there anything that came up that surprised you? And if so, how did that revelation influence your perspective on Senator Reid himself?
Well, one thing that I think I didn't quite appreciate was in his time as Senate Majority Leader, and while President Obama was in office too, the two of them really took it upon themselves, maybe not single-handedly, but they were kind of led the movement to diversify the federal bench, the district court bench, especially in Nevada. And I think that's something that I didn't really appreciate. And then once I really dug into it, it's incredible. And it's a brief topic on our paper. That's another thing that much more scholarship could be done on. But just how effective, while Leader Reid and President Obama had the opportunity to nominate judges, how much more diverse, how much more representation there is on the federal bench, looking at when they started and when they finished. I was really impressed and surprised, and I didn't expect that to be such a revelation for me.
I think one of the things that surprised me were some of the stories that came out in our interviews about what Senator Harry Reid was like to work with. We had asked a few people who spent late hours with him and in his office, and what was that like. And we learned that I think it was Kai Anderson who told this story, and I might bring it up in the paper a little bit, but he basically said, at this time, Senator Harry Reid was like over 60, and most of his staff were young, in their 20s and 30s. And he said Senator Reid could still outwork any of us. Like, he would put in those long hours, and he had the work ethic and the drive of someone half his age. And he said sometimes it would be embarrassing because the younger people would be tired and want to go home and sleep, but they were like, no, if he can do it, I can do it. And so I think that not that I was surprised that he had a good work ethic, but I was surprised to hear kind of those behind the scenes stories. And then as well as the fact that he even though he was Senate Majority Leader and the Democratic whip, I mean, he was not necessarily a super outgoing person. He didn't like to speak in front of really large crowds or do really big campaign events. He liked to just sort of put his head down and get the work done. And that's not really the personality, I think, that you see. A lot of politicians today seem to be more about the media appearances and the crowds and the hype. And he was more of a just get it done, sort of, I think, more of a hometown Nevada guy.
Something that stood out to me was Senator Reid's ability to compromise, and how that ability to compromise was such a great, it just, sorry, it contributed greatly to his success in his legislative career. In fact, he's actually quoted in your paper, or he quotes, "Legislation is the art of compromise." And I think that that's an important lesson for readers and future leaders to take away from your guys' paper. Is there anything else that you learned about Senator Reid that maybe didn't make it into the paper for whatever reason that you think would be interesting or valuable for readers or future leaders that might read your paper?
I think one of the stories that I hit on a little bit in the paper, but didn't go into too much depth, but that was told to me by Roger Scholl, who started Friends of Nevada Wilderness. And he tells one of my favorite stories in the paper about his conversations with Harry Reid at that time. And Roger Scholl was really passionate about preserving wilderness in Nevada. And Senator Harry Reid was like, well, all these wilderness areas, I haven't seen them, I haven't been to them, and I don't want to protect them unless I've been to every one of them. And Roger Scholl was like, well, I don't know if that's possible to go to every one of them. These are some pretty rugged landscapes. But he was really insistent. He said, I want to know why these areas are important, and I want to know, what is it about them that really should be protected. And instead of letting it go, he insisted on seeing them. So Roger Scholl ended up getting a tour of helicopters, and they did a tour sort of Nevada wilderness from the sky. So he was able to sort of show Harry Reid what all of these different areas were like and explain why they were unique or why they should be protected as wilderness. And so I think that I like that story because I think it shows that, if Senator Reid didn't maybe know a lot about a certain topic, or he was being asked to do something and he felt like, well, why are we really doing it? He personally wanted to feel like the commitment and the importance of his own work. And so he would go to these extra lengths and ask for this, I think it was like a 3-day helicopter ride, which, how many politicians would have wanted to do that? But he was really insistent. And I think that just goes to show, if he didn't know something, he was going to figure it out, and he wanted to see it with his own eyes, which is a great quality that he had.
Well, I don't have as good a story as Sarah, but I will tell a story nevertheless. Megan Jones, who was Senator Reid's political advisor, we discussed the 1998 Senate election. Important to me because it was my first year voting, so you can do the math and figure out how ancient I am. But in any event, it was a very, very close race. It came down to a couple hundred votes, if even that, maybe even double digits. And they were up all night. She described sleeping at the couch in the, behind the scenes at the hotel they were in. And in the end, Senator Reid won by, as I said, a very, very short margin. And his opponent, who was John Ensign, conceded, didn't do what someone might, fight to the bitter end, call shenanigans or anything like that. And I think Senator Reid and Megan Jones back that up. You can read in the story. Really respect that about Senator Ensign or future Senator Ensign, because when he wound up running for Senate the next time, and won, Senator Reid and Senator Ensign kind of formed a little bit of an unofficial alliance. They were really friendly, considering they were opposite political parties, and they had such a bitter race only a few years before. I think it shows a lot of maturity and a willingness to do what's best for the state, and they wound up doing some good work together, even though they were from opposite parties.
All right, so the paper is all about Senator Reid's legacy, and so I want you both to touch on what you think his single greatest legacy has been. I know you probably have talked about it, but if you just want to shortly explain what you think his number one legacy has been.
Well, I talked about the Affordable Care Act. So while that is what I think in Yucca Mountain, I'll say, just as a Nevadan, we're a state that could easily be the political backwater, right? And when I was young, when I was growing up, when I first became interested in politics, we really were. People didn't know how to pronounce our state. I lived in Nevada to most people. And growing up, making Senator Reid such a national figure, being the leader of the Senate, making Nevada issues important, I think, for me personally and for my state, it's a proud thing to suddenly be a place that people have to think about and consider the interests of in a national way.
I don't know how I'm going to beat that answer. I also think, just looking at the topics that I covered, I think in general, just the amount of protections that he was able to put in place for land in Nevada and endangered lakes in Nevada, I think, these protections are ones that will be in place for generations and generations and generations. And so I think in terms of lasting legacies, I think his conservation work would be towards the top of my list.
Mm-hmm. And I know that's a tough question because read the paper. There's a lot. All right. So in conclusion, what impact do each of you hope that your paper has on the readers?
I think the impact would be that I would want people to remember that Senator Reid embodied, and I want every Nevadan to embody, is to take care of each other and take care of your land. And I think if we can do those two things as a state, and we can take those lessons with us of, what is it going to take? What do we need to do in order to take care of the people around us and take care of the state that we're in and the planet that we have? And I think there are some great examples in our paper about how Senator Reid was able to do that. But I think each one of us is able to do that in our own lives, in our own work, and what's important to us. And if we can remember that, I think that would be the most important legacy I can think of.
Who can say it better than take care of each other and take care of your land? And when you look at the Affordable Care Act, when you look at labor unions, when you look at all these things, marriage equality, immigration, these are all things that are about taking care of each other and taking care of your land. I wish we had that turn of phrase when we were writing the paper, because that's just so beautiful. It couldn't possibly end on a better note than that. Take care of each other, take care of your land.
Great, thank you. So where can people access your paper?
Thank you for asking. It's on the Nevada Law Journal forum right now online. You can download a PDF. I believe there's a link somewhere below that you'll be able to find to connect to our paper. I really hope the reader grabs it, enjoys reading it, and if it gives you something to think about, then Sarah and I have done our job.
Yeah, and thank you for this great interview and being our wonderful host. And of course, we want to thank everyone that contributed to our paper, all of the editors, our interviewees. There was just a whole team of people who worked really hard to make sure that this paper ended up the way that it is, and we're just very grateful.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for sitting down and taking the time. I know I enjoyed the paper, and I know that anyone else that takes the time to read it will enjoy it too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
It was really such a pleasure to write too, and Sarah was the best. Working with such a great co-author was the highlight of my law school career, maybe.
So nice. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.